Hi, welcome back. As I mentioned before, we were doing the CodingBat Array2 Have3 problem, version 1, which is sitting here on screen right now. But yet there is an alternative solution to this, right? And we're going to call this version 2. And it's good to compare different versions. If you look at this one right here, right, we have a for loop, which both versions will have. And we have one if, two ifs, three ifs, four ifs, five ifs in here, right? The one that we're going to do actually has four ifs, but is interesting in some other ways. So I think it's going to be a good opportunity to look at both these solutions and compare. And some of the techniques in this new solution might be more useful in other situations. And you'll have to compare this new one to the old one and say, well, in this particular problem, which way works better, for me? Okay. So there's an understanding level there of which one works better, but then also, an efficiency, right? Question as well that might come into play. So let us begin. The first thing here is that, we are going to have this count variable still, of course, because we still want to count things up. But in this new loop, we're actually going to go and visit each element. So instead of stopping at one short of the end, we're going to go to the last element. Okay, which means then that this whole technique here of saying, well, compare it to the one after, that's not going to work because that would give us an array index out of bounds exception, right? So we won't be able to use that. But each time through, we will still look at the current element, and if it's a 3, well, a couple things might happen, okay? And we need to look at those cases. But we will not need this. And so as well as that, since we're going to each element, we don't need this, because if you remember this, if this was saying like once we're done with traversing through the array, but stopping one short of the end, we still have to look at the end element. So we don't need that if anymore, okay? Now, what we do need, though, is we still need to sort of recall what happened when we looked at the previous element. Was it a 3 or wasn't it? Okay, so instead of looking at two elements every time through the loop, we're only going to look at one element, but we'll have the code remember what happened on the previous one. And if we remember what happened on the previous one, we don't want to know the specific number, we just want to know whether or not it was a 3. Right, so that we can say that, if we have something like this and the previous one is a 3 and the current one's a 3, we've got a problem. So if we just need to know whether or not it is something, the type of variable we want to use, right, is a Boolean. Okay, so it's going to be saying whether or not we found a 3 on the previous pass. We'll start at the beginning just saying, hey, false, right, as a default value. Now, here's where the nitty-gritty of the code comes into play. And we have multiple cases of what could happen. So the first thing that could happen is we might look at the current element in the nums array, nums I, and we might say, well, you know what? It's not a 3. Okay, and if it's not a 3, we're not going to do anything really, right? We're not going to say, well, add one to that counter or anything like that. So we just want to remember through the found variable that the one we're looking at now, we're going to remember it for next time that it was not a 3, so found equals false. Now, that doesn't change anything here because initially it's false, and here it's false again, but you can imagine if, we look at this and this is 3, then that's going to be a situation where the previous time it was true, but then when we get to this one, that's one where we're going to change a true to a false because we want to remember that 1 for when we get to this 3 to say that, hey, the previous one, that wasn't a 3. So found equals false. Okay. Now, beyond that, there's a couple other things that can occur, which, by the way, this is one of the situations where, I just went through this code on a previous version of this video, and, being in a hurry, wasn't following, my standard convention of putting in the brackets anywhere, and lo and behold, ran into a problem because, I keep switching between Java and Python. Anyway, so when we find a 3, it's important to say, well, when we currently have a 3, what was the previous one? So two things that could happen. We could have had the previous one also be a 3, right? If you look at this if statement, what we're saying is that right now the current element is a 3, and the previous pass-through, that was also 3. That's like here, right? We go through when I equals 2, and we say, well, found equals true, and the next time through, nums I equals 3, and from the previous time, found was true. Remember, back-to-back 3s, big no-no, right? So in that case, what we want to do is we want to say, finish, just exit the loop, exit the function, exit everything, return false. Okay? So we can not have a 3, we can have a 3 in the previous one also be a 3, or we could have the situation where, yes, the current one is a 3, but the previous one was not a 3. Well, that's not a return false in that case, right? If the previous one's a 3, and if the current one's a 3, and the previous one wasn't a 3, that's good. That's good. So we want to remember that the current one is a 3, so we still have to set the value of found. We want to set it to true, but in addition to that, we have to, if we find a 3, we want to count it. So count plus plus. Okay? So let's just go over this loop again to see, through, right? We're going through every element, looking at it once. If the current one's not a 3, we don't do anything to the counter, but we need to remember that it wasn't a 3, so we say found equals false. If it is a 3, currently, then one of these two situations occurs. Either we have a 3 this time, and we had a 3 last time. That's the no-no case. Or we currently have a 3, and the previous one wasn't a 3. So we want to remember that the current one is a 3 for next time, and we want to increase the counter. Okay? And then it's just going to go through the whole way. Once that's done, the ending is just the same. The ending is, hey, if we had 3 3s, good, return true. If we don't, no good, false. Okay. So you can contact me during office hours or send an email if you have questions about this. We can discuss it further. Okay, let's hit go and look at our results. Hey, bam, it worked. And again, as always, remember, useful to compare different solutions to coding problems. That's why it's called computer science. Yes.